so many business owners fly blind in terms of actually understanding how money moves through their business, how they make money, if they're making money.
And talking about structure and processes and the importance of having a repeatable operational component to your business.
That owner has started to remove themselves and has put systems in place to help that business run without them touching every piece of it.
Be consistent with those sales and marketing efforts, understand who your audiences are, understand what the pain points that you solve for them are, and then let that be your strategy. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the NextGen Strategies Podcast. My name is Grant Covault. Joining me, as always, is Mr. Tyler Davis. And Ty, we've been on a little bit of a break recently.
Little siesta.
Little siesta over the last couple of months. But, with summer and a lot of activities that were going on and different things happening with the businesses, we thought, maybe it would be a good time to take a little bit of a break and review some of the awesome feedback that we've gotten from a lot of our listeners and think about, what maybe does the next season of the NextGen Strategies podcast hold. And for those of you who have been following along for a while, you might notice that we even have a different look right now, which is super cool. So we've done some updates to, our brand style, and, Ty and I have kind of kicked around some ideas for, what are the next awesome things that we should be doing and talking about on this podcast, right? Because, as we think about the purpose of the podcast and, what the feedback has been is, continue to bring on guests. Number one, folks really love the guests. They love the interviews. They love hearing kind of those real authentic stories. And so Ty and I have been kind of thinking about, who's are going to be our next list of guests, and, what are the awesome, people who we have in our networks. And so we're really excited because we have some really good ones lined up coming up here. And then we also were thinking about, what are some of the things that are happening in the world? Like, whether it be current events, it could be things at a macro level, at a micro level that we hear within our clients and companies that we work with that, these are some subjects that maybe we should be doing some deeper dives on, or, maybe tools, tips, and tricks. And so we have a lot more of that lined up as well coming up in the coming months.
Yeah, it's kind of like real stories and then also practical advice.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, that's a good point. We want to continue to make sure we're talking about things that are practical and not the get rich quick schemes and everything else that you seem to see on these podcasts. But so what do we want to talk about today, Tyler? And I think as we go into this next season, we want to spend a little bit of time in this episode talking about what were some of our key things that we covered in our last season, or some key thoughts coming up here. We're in Q4 now. And, what are some things that maybe were our takeaways over the last season that were our favorites, whether they're topics or guests and things that were brought from guests. And we're going to do a quick little recap today, go through some key points, talk a little bit high level here at the end about, what's upcoming. And we're going to go from there. And again, super excited to be back. And we're going to be rolling here for the next couple of months again.
Yeah, I think Q4 and this topic list we have here is kind of, lined up, right? Grant and I have been joking around calling Q4 the Q4 mode, right? Like I'm kicking in the Q4 mode, which can mean different things for a lot of different people. But it's funny to me. I always think it's like the first thing I think about is, business wise, what, for accountants, Q4 tends to be a busy time of the year. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you're battling that plus like all this strategy that you put into the year, and then what about the strategy for next year? And
yep.
I think this is really timely with some of the things we've covered over the last year.
Absolutely.
And kind of wrap that all into one little package here today.
100%.
So the first thing we wanted to talk about was really some of the topics we covered around culture. Culture is a part of strategy, and I think that it's just not how people feel. It's not just this mysterious thing looming around. Culture is something that you can strategize and you can do, practical things you can touch that impact your culture.
Yeah. And I think we had some really great guests come on and talk a little bit about, different dynamics of culture and how that looks within businesses. And, both of them, two that come to mind, they talk about culture within family-owned businesses. Mm-hmm. One being more of somebody who, started his business from scratch and grew it. And then one that's more of a generational business that has been passed down through years. And I think some of the parallels that we saw were, culture looks every culture looks a little bit different. But if you're not being intentional with understanding kind of the dynamic of what's going on within your organization, how people are feeling, the output of the work, how the customers feel, everything else really drives from your people. And you have to start with people. And that's, I think, kind of why we're kicking off. Like, as you're doing your strategic planning, as you're looking into next year, as you're looking at how you did this year, I think it's important to start with the culture piece and the people.
Yeah, I think the big thing I learned this year, especially from the guests, was, you're talking, there are businesses where it's not a family business and, the owner is, started it from the ground up, and there's also family businesses. But in both of those stories, I think there was a lot of value in leadership kind of getting their hands dirty.
Yep.
Because it showed a lot to the team. When you think about family-owned businesses, the worry that you can have around culture is this idea of nepotism, right? That, just because someone's related to someone or a son of someone, they get a leadership role. We listen to someone who started from the ground up.
Yeah.
In that family business. And then you have another story of a gentleman who started his business as a side hustle and stuck with his team and really invested in his team and really rolled up his sleeves to develop the leadership culture that he wanted. And I think both of those things just show that, there's no really stepping back as a leader. And I think leading by example and kind of getting into the dirty work sets a really important tone for culture. It's that, what do they call that? Like tone at the top, right?
Absolutely. And I think making sure that everybody has adopted a growth mindset within your organization is important too. As long as you're being intentional with making sure that everybody has kind of like their eyes on what the next step is in their career progression, and you're making sure that your job as a leader is to enable those folks to be able to kind of grow that ladder. And it could be personally, like personal development things. It could be professional skills. But, I think as long as you're, doing the right things, taking care of people, it's easier said than done, right? But as long as you kind of have that focus on that growth progression, I think, you're going to be in a good spot. And like Tyler jokes about this all the time. Just treat your people right. Just be a good person.
Well, yeah, that's retention that you're talking about, right? Because, most people do want to, not all people. Some people like to stay in their lane and do the same role, but there's things they want to grow into, whether it's in the same role they're in or through the company, and removing barriers and creating opportunities for people in your company. That's exciting. We heard that two different ways. We heard that with Luke in his episode where he was just really mindful of what his leaders or different people in his company wanted to do. And then we heard it again when we had an episode talking a little bit about ESOPs, like employee share owned, companies. That's another amazing way that you may look at getting A, that growth mindset in your employees, and B, this ability for employees to come up with the business. Really awesome stuff there. And I think you're right. That's a good leading topic. But there's more, right? We have a couple
absolutely.
Other
so, culture being number one. Number two that we had probably some of the most episodes around or subject around was building systems before you need them, and talking about structure and processes and the importance of having a repeatable, scaling operational component to your business.
Yep.
And so we talked a lot of different things, and I think one of the first things that we talked about was just role alignment and understanding kind of, you have people with certain sets of skills and wants and desires, and like you have to start to put those people in the right, seats on the bus. And we had some folks on that talked about their experience with EOS, right?
Yeah.
And just understanding, kind of what your roles are and what does the delegation of those roles look like, and making sure that you've got the process that kind of, could put those people in position to be successful.
Yeah. I mean, it starts way back. We had, we just had an episode on strategic planning, but that's kind of where it starts, because you got to understand the vision of what you're growing to then kind of narrow in on the systems that you need to get there. That's the whole topic we keep talking about, where business owners want to work on the business and not in the business. Well, why do you want to do that? Is that because you need to do that to grow to a certain point? You need to do that because you're just hands are in too deep? But man, you can go 1,000 different angles on systems, but that is what allows you to build and scale. And it's in every little area. It's in your accounting, it's in your marketing, it's in your delivery of your product or service. Anything you can systematize makes hiring and training easier and keeps the focus on the goals that you set with this larger, strategic plan or, vision that you have.
Yeah. And I think, to put a point on that too, like on the EOS model, right? Like you've got your vision, like for your organization, where do you want to be this year, maybe 3 years, 5 years, some people even go out 10 years. That vision then has to be executed. And I think you and I really appreciate about EOS is that it's very practical in the fact that you go, okay, here's a vision. And then here are the big things that need to happen to get to that vision. And then you just continue to break those rocks up. And, if you're familiar with that world, into smaller actionable things that you can do, every week, every month, every quarter, every year to eventually get yourself to that plan. And it doesn't seem so overwhelming. And as long as you, kind of have that plan and leadership is establishing that, like the great thing about US is that you're going to, on a regular basis, make sure that you are accomplishing those rocks along the way. Because if you try to skip steps or you don't, do the right things within, along the way, you're not going to be able to hit the bigger goals and objectives.
Yeah, excellent point to bring up EOS, because when we had our episode with Forrest, the fractional COO, his point was have an operating system.
Yep.
EOS is a type of operating system. There are several others. You can homebrew your own, but it's saying this is our core operating system of how we do business. And then from there, you're able to break things down and stay aligned rather than us going back and forth talking about, well, you need a strategic plan, but then you also need like a really good system for how your invoices flow. It's saying, let's stick to an operating system that naturally flows those things down. Excellent point there. I think that's the big thing that I learned this year was that you really can't stay consistent and structured without some form of operating system in your business.
Absolutely. And I think, so that's number 2, right?
Yeah.
Make sure that we've got systems and processes in place to enable the scale of the business. And then number 3 kind of goes right into that. And it's like, okay, so you've got this vision and you've got this plan to scale. It's like, how do you now fulfill upon those different things that are happening? And what does that look like from a people standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, you got to hire people, and that's easier said than done.
Number 3, hire the right people at the right point in time. Easy to say, right?
Gosh, I mean, we had even like our first 3 episodes, we talked about going from solo to scaling to larger size.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is the biggest, I think, leap and hurdle for business owners is you have to actually be able to hire competent people, which it's harder and harder because there has been just kind of a tightening in the labor market of finding really high skilled, individuals across many different industries. Mm-hmm. But then, like you said, the timing matters. And like what you're giving them to do matters. We have plenty of episodes talking about, keep in mind that when you hire someone, you're not just going to get a productivity boost day one. I mean, that you got to have back to systems available for them to get to the point that they are a productive member of your business. And there's just a lot there. And also, just planning for that. We talked about as a business scales, hiring has to be very, very in the front of your brain because you have to fulfill on the product or services that you're providing. So you have to be thinking about your cash flow. You have to be thinking about how long it takes to get that person up to speed. And then the whole, mission, vision, values of your organization, is that going to reach your said customers? A lot of failure can come in that growth phase with hiring people.
And I think if you think about the failures that happen too, is sometimes folks will hire too fast and they weren't ready.
Yeah.
And I think one of the other things that, we had discussions with other folks that came on were like, you don't necessarily always have to hire somebody to fill or to eliminate a capacity problem or to, fulfill something that you think your business needs. Sometimes you might just need to ask an expert for help in a certain discipline.
Right.
And, to your point, that was where we were kind of talking about in the businesses that are in growth phase, like, yes, if you're, doubling, tripling year over year, like you may feel like, oh my gosh, I got to go bring in a new COO or a CFO or a marketing guy or, HR people. But sometimes it maybe makes sense of like when you need to have that flexibility as a business and like things are going really fast. And sometimes it maybe makes sense to hire on maybe a 1099, maybe a consultant, maybe somebody who can fill a gap in a short-term period. But you're not necessarily going to have to be committed to that person for a really long time and do all the training. It maybe makes sense to sometimes, allow yourself to have that flexibility, bring in a subject matter expert for where you are in your business today to put that certain, initiative or plan or department in a position to be successful for when that person sometimes comes.
Well, yeah, a lot of these, especially in the fractional space, are geared around, like, I don't know how many of I've talked to recently, especially like fractional CEOs are like, you're not hiring me like long term. I'm here to like get this teed up for the next person.
Right.
And that's so common. And the other thing to think about here, because I've just seen, I'm sure every single industry has this problem, but we have, a pipeline issue. Usually what happens is people want to hire someone with a significant amount of experience so they can hit the ground running and fulfill.
Mm-hmm.
But there's only so many of those people. And you have to really think about what your pipeline is, because you may have to start considering hiring at the entry level and training those people to be that 3 to 5 years of experience.
Yep.
And guess what? There's positives in that, because you get to train them in your business and not have them trained in a different business. You see it across many different industries. And I think we had an episode on it where we're talking about, being present at vocational schools, colleges, different local programs. Like here we have a workforce partnership, is really getting your feet in there and taking a risk in hiring these very young people with lower amounts of experience, but knowing the investment that you put into them turns into that very good middle, experienced individual, rather than finding them or never actually finding them when you have a position open.
Right. 100%. So yeah, number 3 is be really thoughtful of your hiring, and as you plan capacities and growth, know when to hire, know when to bring in a consultant or somebody else, or outsource it to an agency of whatever whatever discipline you're thinking about. That's really important. Know when those triggers are. Number 4 is one that I will end up probably cutting Tyler off on this part, but there's this little important piece of businesses that is called financing and money and cash flow and taxes, and that tends to be a pretty important piece of many businesses that you better have your arms around if you want to be successful.
Yeah, it's absolutely. It's the thing that kind of keeps me up at night or drives me crazy sometimes is seeing so many business owners fly blind in terms of actually understanding how money moves through their business, how they make money, if they're making money. It's very, very common to see people just looking at their bank account going, we're good, we're not good.
There's something there. Today, there's not.
Yeah, and there's so much you can do in terms of being able to forecast, model, track expenditures, building your financials that actually tell you a story that's relevant to what you need to do for this strategic plan or this, goals and vision that you have in the future. Because it's so common to see there are elements of the business that are extremely successful from a finance standpoint, and there are elements that are not. And we had another, huge topic when we talked about maybe you don't need to hire, or maybe you want to scale, but that doesn't actually mean more customers.
Right.
This is where the finance piece is really important, so you can drill down to see what are your winners and what are your losers, because you can curate that down and scale naturally with the same amount of work capacity that you have now. And that's just one of the things I don't think as many people are doing, especially in that early stage of business, and in that immediate growth phase.
Yeah. You have to understand your most profitable customers, your least profitable customers, and your business should really be aligned around those things. Like, you have to understand those numbers. And I think by far, and you just talked on it too, like if you're a business that's just starting out, or like you're a major growth phase, like it's super important. Mm-hmm. But then kind of flipping that on its head as I think about having Chris on, and Chris starts talking about, if you've done that your whole life, Chris talked about now it's time to exit plan or just put together succession planning. And when you start thinking about like the value of my business and what it means to add value to a business, like towards the end of the career, it sounds like like now you've got something that is sellable or has a value or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about that, and what we're talking about in terms of this financial strategy, the operating system, different systems inside your business is what does create value in your business. Because what we learned is that no one wants to buy a job, right? So if you're the business owner who is just immersed and involved in everything, it's really hard for the next person to come in and buy that business from you because they don't have the capacity to give 60 hours a week to this provides.
Right.
So they're looking for those businesses where that owner has started to remove themselves and has put systems in place to help that business run without them touching every piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that is very important.
100%. So number 4, know your books, be sound financially, understand. And guess what? 99% of people, you're going to need to bring in some outside people to help you do that. Unless you are a CPA and a controller, accountant, financial person. It takes a group effort to really be good at this. And it takes a good tool. It takes a good, whether it's, QuickBooks Online or it's one of these other, systems exist. Like you got to have some stuff in place there.
Yeah. The thing I want to leave you with on this is that I do talk to a lot of people who think they do know how much they're making per customer, and then nothing's ever been tied out or reconciled or really looked at dollar for dollar, cent for cent. And they're wrong. They are like, well, we make a bunch of money on this client. I was like, well, what about all the overhead laying over here you didn't assign to this customer? Did you? They soak up 75% of your administrative time, and you didn't assign that cost there.
Yeah.
And just be, careful there when you're not looking holistically at your books. Because if your books are getting reconciled every month, it's got every dollar and every cent, right? Not some other random tool you're using, like to do your invoicing or your CRM. Like that's going to tell you a lot of pretty numbers like revenue, and maybe a little bit of hours somebody's worked on something, but not all the other stuff, the rent and the electric, and your office administrative assistant or your office manager. Like those things need to be factored in.
100%. And then we come up to the last one, which is my personal favorite, which Tyler will probably have to cut me off on this one. It's just consistency in your marketing and sales efforts, and how do you continue to scale and grow, those efforts and those things that you're doing. And, we had a lot of guests talk about what they've done for their businesses. I've definitely added in some of my opinions and thoughts and things that I've seen been successful. But, I think it really boils down to, and we already kind of said a little bit of like, you got to understand who your target audiences are, right? If I'm going after a certain type of customer, a certain industry, a certain location segment, you got to define those things first before you start throwing things at the wall and hoping something sticks. And I think that's where a lot of business owners kind of get in their own head. Sometimes it's like, well, we want to be everything to everybody. And sometimes it's good to be not something to somebody. In fact, that's actually probably a good sign that you've nailed it when you can start to see, where you are being successful.
Absolutely.
And so that's for me, it's like, got to understand our audience. And then, the second piece is like, everybody goes, well, okay, like we got to do all this marketing effort. Like we got to put the billboards out and spend all this money on advertising and, have the biggest, baddest website in the world. And, we should be doing all this social media stuff. And while, yes, sometimes those things will work for certain companies at a certain point in time, the marketing guy would tell you like, first, you should probably look at your network and do a little bit of like networking, like go reach out to those people who already either work with you or people in your network, because guess what? That's going to be the fastest way to get new sales is your existing clients and your existing contacts in your network.
I mean, we're added a word, but we see so many ads, right? I mean, we just this constant
inundated.
We're marketed to every second of the day.
Yeah.
And what I keep coming down to that works is just talking to real people. Like get outside, see a piece of the sun,
Get out
put some oxygen, and shake a hand.
Yeah.
And talk to somebody in real life, and that really is impactful and it makes a difference. And it's almost like forgotten. Like every time you hear about a huge marketing strategy, you're right. It's we're doing ad spend here and this website here and video here. And it's like, where's the part where people picked up the phone and talked to each other or went to a trade show or an event and put a face to a name? That's still really effective.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got to build that foundation, right? Like, and I make the analogy all the time. It's like, if you're building a house, you try to build a house, your business, on something that doesn't have a solid foundation, the house is going to crumble.
Yeah.
So what is that foundation? It's, strong brand, strong understanding of knowing who you are and who you work with. It's being able to have good clients and customers that will give you reviews or testimonials. And, you continue to nurture those folks because you got to have you don't want to have a leaky funnel where you're bringing in all this new business, but at the same time, you've got a bunch of customer churn. So make sure that foundation is strong. Don't overanalyze, don't overthink it. Like what you have some of those foundational elements set. Okay, great. Now we have some maybe revenue or budget that we can set aside for, really more aggressively going after those new prospects, new customers. But don't forget about the people who got you there. And don't forget about sometimes you can make a very nice ask to somebody and say, hey, you know what? If you had a really good working experience with me, is there anybody else like you that who you would be willing to refer to? That's a very fast way to grow business.
I call it like shiny object syndrome.
Yeah.
Because I fallen victim to it. It's like, it's so much more fun to be like, well, we're going to like change our website and put these cool videos of us and these pictures of us up there. And that's going to look amazing. We got the best website in our industry. I'm like, those things are important.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But like, who's going to go there if you don't,
you're not talking to anybody.
Yeah. It's like, great. That's a foundational item. Sure. But it's like, It's so much more fun to go chase these little pretty things to do, and not as fun, especially if you're a little more reserved person, to just go approach people and talk to them and be a little vulnerable. Yeah.
Yep. 100%. 100%. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the last one here for today is be consistent with those sales and marketing efforts, understand who your audiences are, understand what the pain points that you solve for them are, and then let that be your strategy. So yeah, I mean, we're really excited. Like I said, today we wanted to kind of cover some of our key talking points from our last episode, or from our last season. But as we look forward, I'm really excited because we have a lot of really, really good guests that are going to be coming on, more stories, more, times that people are going to be sharing like, yeah, I messed up here. Don't do this. Or this is something, a hack or something that I developed myself that has been really successful for us. So we're looking really, really much forward to those inspirational stories. And obviously we'll also continue to have some really, really good content around things you can do to help scale. And, this is going to be a great season. We didn't talk about this yet, but if you all remember last year, we did a episode around the holiday times and fruit baskets. I haven't told Tyler this yet, but I think that we are going to throw in another holiday episode because that was one of my favorite ones. So we'll maybe give you another top 10 list for gifts or whatever coming up.
That will be fun. Yes, like a little top 10. But hey, guys, think about it. By the time you see this, it will be Q4. So I expect you to put your Q4 mode on and
that's right,
and get after it, because we're going to bug you about what your strategic plan is for 2026, and probably not going to leave you alone about if you actually met any of your goals from 2025.
Yep. 100%. 100%. Well, thank you everybody again for watching today and listening in. If you're listening in, we are also going to be having a lot of other avenues for you all to connect with us in the next coming months. But if anything, always continue to like, subscribe, follow the pod wherever you get your podcasts. If you're following us on YouTube, thanks. Leave some comments, reshare some stuff. We can't be successful in this without the engagement of you all. And we appreciate your time today, and a lot of really, really fun stuff coming up this season. So until next time, see you later. Thanks for tuning in to the NextGen Strategies Podcast, where we share real stories and practical strategies to help you grow your business. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to like and share it on all of our social media channels.